Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this Scottish history talk. Today I'm going to talk about Jacobitism support in Scotland between 1689 and 1746. I will try to explain why Jacobitism enjoyed a certain degree of popularity, not only in Scotland, but also in other parts of Britain. To do this, it is deemed necessary to mention three key dates in this movement: the beginning, which can be placed in 1688-89, with the fall of James VII and the accession to power of the Protestant William and Mary. The second great attempt to recover the throne for the Stuarts, which happened in 1715 with the Earl of Mar's rising, and at the end the last and almost successful Jacobites rising, which took place between 1745 and 1746. To start with, Stuarts, headed by James VII of Scotland and II of England, abandoned British soil and fled to France in December 1688. At the beginning of 1689, Scotland's Convention of Estates met in Edinburgh to finally decide to offer the country's crown to William and Mary, who were proclaimed King and Queen in April, the same month when Graham of Claverhouse, Viscount Dundee, provoked the first Jacobite rebellion. This first rebellious rising, though, was a deceitful one. Viscount Dundee's forces did gain victory against the British army at Killiecrankie on 26 July 1689, but Dundee himself died during the fight and the Jacobites seemed to lose force, finally being routed by government cavalry at the Hall of Crumdale on May Day 1690. Support for Jacobitism initially came from the West Highlands, mainly from clans such as the MacDonalds and the Camerons of Loch. Dundee's troops were reinforced by about 300 Irish, so Bloody Clavers managed to reunite 2,400 men by the time of the Battle of Killiecrankie. None of the great aristocratic and landed houses of the lowlands showed any interest in the Jacobite cause, proving to be quite unpopular amongst most of the Scots. As mentioned above, almost all the Jacobite supporters came from the Highlands, but that didn't mean that all the Western clans fancied it. The powerful Highland clan Campbell were staunch Williamites, and they proved to be essential to beat these first rebellious risings. Clan Campbell's support to British government can be explained that they had much to lose if they had decided to support the Jacobites. They were established since long ago as a major Highland clan, owning great quantity of western and northern territories and having a huge influence on Scottish politics. The 9th Earl of Argyll, Archibald Campbell, was given the title of Duke in 1701 as a reward for his support for William and Mary, recovering his father's estates. Clan Campbell's important position had a negative side: the alienation of other Western clans, such as the once almighty Clan MacDonald. This local rivalry can explain why the MacDonalds of Glencoe and Keppoch favoured the Jacobites. They saw a chance to displace the Campbells and to recover their power. Local rivalry can also explain Clan Cameron siding with the Jacobites, as they too had bitter Campbell enemies since the Battle of Glenlivet, fought in 1594. The complicated clan lifestyle, with historical enemies fighting each other during centuries, can explain why there was a big Highland support for Jacobitism. Many of these clans were more interested in fighting other clans than fighting for King William or King James. The Jacobite MacDonalds wanted to recover their position, while the Campbells wanted to maintain the status quo. As for the Irish support, it is also easily explained. Recuperate Ireland's independence was its motive. Irishmen not only enjoyed the Scottish Jacobite army, they also fought their own war against the Protestant government army at the Battle of the Boyne. To beat the Williamite in Ireland and in Scotland would have meant recovering the Irish majority religion, Catholicism. Finally, to end this first period, Viscount Dundee's support for James Stuart was motivated by his religious beliefs. He was an Episcopalian, his political ideas, he was a Tory, and his position. He was a prominent general in King James' army. Dundee had been an active member of the persecution of the Covenanters, gaining his nickname Bloody Clavers for his relentless repression of the South-West Covenanters. He certainly had much more in common with James than he had with William. To start with the 1715 period, one must go back to February 1692, when the massacre of Glencoe took place. The MacLeans of Glencoe, a set of the MacDonald clan, on their way home from their defeat against government force at the Battle of Dunkeld, looted the lands and stole the livestock of Robert Campbell of Glenlyon, a member of the powerful Clan Campbell. This event would be revenge, and the charge came soon enough. King William offered all Highland clans a pardon for their parts in the Jacobite uprising, as long as they took an oath of allegiance before the 1st January 1692 in front of a magistrate. The chief of Glencoe, Alastair MacLean, on his way to take the oath in Inverary, was delayed by Clan Campbell in the figure of Colin Campbell, Sheriff of Argyll. MacLean was late in taking his oath of allegiance. John and Archibald Campbell saw the opportunity for revenge by talking John Dalrymple, Master of Stair, into convincing King William to punish the MacDonalds of Glencoe. Government troops led by Captain Drummond and, of course, Captain Robert Campbell of Glenlyon murdered virtually the whole Clan MacDonald of Glencoe. This event is essential to understand why Jacobitism carried on having so many Highland supporters. With the 1715 rising, not only figured Highlanders, Episcopalians began to join the movement and figured as the most numerous Jacobite group together with the clansmen. What motivated Episcopalian support was the political belief that the monarch, in this case James Stuart, ruled by divine right, being accountable only to God for his actions. So Episcopalians viewed the 1688 revolution as an illegitimate act. Another fact that created episcopal support was that the British Protestant government imposes Presbyterianism on the Church of Scotland, at the same time abolishing the estate of bishops. But there were lowland Presbyterian Scots who were starting to see Jacobitism as a national movement against the evil English. This was due to the fact that the much announced economic benefits that the union would bring still hadn't materialized. Scotland was finding it very difficult to recover from its low economic status, and the union seemed to be imposing more and more taxes, such as the 1713 malt tax. And finally, English Tories were influenced by the Stuart cause. They saw it as a chance to get rid of their powerful Whig opponents and at the same time their irritating Scottish neighbours. Scottish and English Tories planned the 1715 Jacobite rising. James Stuart, the old pretender, called on the Earl of Mar to raise the Highlands, and war began. Precisely, the Earl of Mar, who was to lead the Highlanders to the victorious return of the Stuart monarchy, proved to be a mediocre leader, and although some support was raised along Britain, it proved to be insufficient, as the English Tories dithered to over their lack of support, and the Scottish Jacobites fell at the Battle of Preston against the Hanoverians, which included the Cameronians in England, and at the Battle of Sheriffmuir, defeated by the government's army, which was led by the clansman John Campbell Duke of Argyll, Scotland. The end of Jacobitism came with their last rising, which began in July 1745 when Charles Stuart, the Young Pretender, landed on the Hebrides with a small troop of volunteers, mainly formed by the Irish Brigade. The rising began successfully for the Jacobites, beating Sir John Coates's Hanoverian army at the Battle of Prestonpans, taking Perth and the capital Edinburgh, carrying on their march into English territory, and finally reaching Derby, where internal conflict between Charles and the skilled Jacobite general George Murray led the rebellious forces to return back to Scotland. The rebels accomplished minor victories at Clifton, Falkirk, and Inverary, but they were finally beaten at the Battle of Culloden. This defeat meaning the virtual end of Jacobitism. The men that took part in the Jacobite forces were once again mainly Highlanders and Irish. As to the Irish, what motivated their participation was the same reason as their previous 1715 appearance. They were persuaded by Stuart principles, Catholicism, and the destruction of Great Britain. But to gain their support, Charles Stuart had to give a series of concessions to the Irish, such as when the Stuarts ruled the British Isles again, Ireland would have its own parliament, thus being a fully independent nation but sharing the same king as England and Scotland. As to the Highlanders, this rising was probably the one which with less support from the clans. The Jacobite cause had lost influence among northern and western chiefs, and pro-Stuart clans such as the Camerons of Lochiel only supported Jacobites after Charles had promised them money in exchange for their support. So, to sum up, the Jacobite movement gained support from some Highland clans due to their desire to end Clan Campbell's power. Irish support was due to Eyre's wish for independence. The Episcopalians wanted to end Presbyterian dominion, and the lukewarm French help never came to anything significant. All these groups really had their own personal reasons to support the Stuarts, but they didn't have much in common. This melting pot of Jacobites meant that the Stuart cause was also joined by many opportunists and adventurers, such as the English Tories, who saw the possible return to power of the Stuarts a chance to free themselves from the influential English Whigs and from Scotland. Well, this is all. If there are any questions, this is the time to ask them. If not, we conclude this talk about Scottish history, particularly about Jacobitism during the 16th and 17th century in Scotland. Thank you very much. Hope to see you again soon.